Hi there, and welcome to Intangify. I'm your host, Matthew Asbell. Intangify is a podcast about the intangible aspects of business. Now, this is not my usual Zoom background because today we are doing part 2 of a joint session with my co-host on talkradio.nyc, Frank R. Harrison. Frank, good to see you again.
Good to see you again.
It's been ages.
I know, right? I mean, I had to sleep through since yesterday.
So on Intangify, we talk about the intangible aspects of business, but in this special episode, we're talking about intangible aspects tied with health. And on Frank's show yesterday, we really talked about aspects in healthcare that intangible things have impact on. But today we're going to flip the coin a little bit and really talk about how health has impact on intangible assets and intangible, aspects of business. So Frank, good to have you.
Same here.
Welcome aboard. Unlike you, I do not have a million disclaimers in my show. Although I'm a lawyer, you would think I should. So
exactly.
Disclaim. You're going to accept all those disclaimers. Thank you very much.
Exactly.
But Frank, I think, for as you haven't been on my show before,
right.
I think where I'd like to start with you today is to have you tell people a little bit about who is Frank R. Harrison.
Right. Well, I would like to answer that in one or two ways, depending upon what you feel is appropriate for your audience. I can tell you my individual story, or I could tell you basically my background and how I fit it into my life's mission.
I think the answer is yes.
Okay.
As long as you keep it to 13 minutes or less.
Oh,
and allow some interaction.
Of course.
We should also mention that this is an experiment, right? Because this is our first time having a live or an in-person joint show, and that we haven't done that before, and so we're kind of figuring it out as we go, including getting the notifications of the Zoom that we aren't watching.
Right.
So,
right.
But tell us who is Frank from all facets.
Well, when I look at you, I look at myself in the mirror, and let me tell you how I mean that. Your background is as diverse as mine. I have a business degree, an MBA. I worked in the music industry for Columbia House Record Club, which was part of Sony Music Entertainment. I, at the same time, have studied neuropsychology. I did a master's thesis on the relationship between epilepsy and depression. I, at the same time, love Italy, speak the language when I'm there. It's been my home away from home in 2 different occasions. I also have a diverse background with healthcare, entertainment, business. I have been an advocate for my father, whose ongoing treatment for cancer has been a challenge. My cousin, who's now unfortunately headed towards Alzheimer's disease. I've been an advisor to a friend of mine on the West Coast who works for the Screen Actors Guild, who just recently broke her leg in 3 places and needed someone to represent her when she had no family available to her. So all of my aspects of my life and career and interests have integrated together. So when I'm asked that question, who is Frank R. Harrison? I blanket it by saying I'm an entrepreneur. But I also say, like on my show, which is what made me launch Frank About Health, I am a surviving epileptic patient, and surviving in such a way where I've learned to overcome the stigmas attached to that disorder and use it as an advocacy platform for many other people with varying disorders. And I think thanks to Sam Leibowitz, who of course introduced us, he's allowed me to be that advocate to a greater audience, not just epileptic patients, people who are dealing with COVID, cancer, diabetes, even other healthcare issues and innovations that are developing over time. So I like to think of myself as an individual that is really here to do my best to help humanity while I'm here. By using all of the resources and education that I've obtained, but putting it to good use and good practice. That's who Frank R. Harrison is.
That makes a lot of sense to me, and I guess I feel like I'm looking in a mirror as well in that sense. The only caveat I have to give is that I have no affiliation with Italy whatsoever. But but I have a strong interest in international cultures and have lived abroad in a couple different places, including Italy at one point. Okay. So Italy was out of the blue, but the rest of it all made sense to me.
That's fine. That's fine.
So what is Frank About Health about?
How it began actually when I approached Sam back in 2016, we met through a mutual friend, is I wanted to do an epilepsy show. It was actually going to be called Frank About Epilepsy. But the marketing in me had known who would watch that. Maybe an epileptic patient would, or a neurologist would. But how am I going to build a grassroots audience when there's only three weeds in that grass pool? So we named it Frank About Health, because at the same time, I was trying to erase the stigma, not influence it. It allowed me during those 8 episodes, I think actually it was 8 or 12 episodes that I had done on the original Talking Alternative Broadcasting Network, that I had a fellow epileptic friend that has been on Frank About, this new iteration of Frank About Health, named Danielle Swanson, who has talked about treating her epilepsy with cannabis. So we were able to talk about cannabis treatments. I had an actress, Retha Gray, who I'm great friends with still after 12 years since we first met, who was able to talk about epilepsy as well as alternative treatments for epilepsy, including music therapy. And it just basically began to allow me to branch out into other healthcare issues. I then, at that time, while trying to focus on erasing the stigma of epilepsy, had the fortune to be employed by Hilton Hotels. So I decided, let me stop the show, try my life at Hilton. And then I got involved in cannabis testing and came back to the world of COVID. So with those 3 experiences in one, I came back to the network to relaunch Frank About Health so that we can advocate and use, especially COVID at that time, all of healthcare as a means for people to get the message out there to find the best resources and treatment choices. Because I was seeing, as we all probably were during the pandemic, a lot of misinformation. So I took it upon myself, while also taking care of my father and my cousin and other things that were going on, to really continue my advocacy work on the radio. So Frank About Health, what it began as an epilepsy show, is now a healthcare advocacy platform.
That's great. So, I think if I were the audience right now, what I would be thinking is, why are these 2 doing a show together, right? Or 2 shows together for that matter.
Right.
And it seems like intangible assets and health are just a very unlikely pairing. But I think, as we illustrated yesterday on your program, there is some discussion to be had, and sometimes having those discussions between unlikely pairings brings about interesting and useful insights that nobody ever would have thought of.
Well, absolutely.
So what I thought we would talk about, and why I thought it made sense to have you also on Intangify, is to really think about health and its relationship, its impact on intangible assets. And in particular, what I was thinking is we should really characterize the different kinds of health there are, because health is not necessarily only about physical health or mental health or a person's individual health.
Right.
But there's other aspects of it that apply in different contexts. But then really talking about health as a prerequisite, health as a need. Health is something that we have to fulfill.
Yes.
Before we can innovate.
Correct.
And then lastly, health as an inspiration, as what prompts innovation and innovation in particular fields, and where we're going with it.
Right. I totally agree. I mean, healthcare is like the equivalent of homeostasis. When you have a balance, you're able to move forward beyond the norm or beyond what's consistent. Whenever any of us wake up, don't feel like we feel like we're out of sorts or we don't feel in balance, all you want to do is sleep all day or binge watch television. You don't want to be as innovative as you can be, and when you're feeling as fully energized and vibrant after maybe 8 hours sleep or whatever. But it does manifest through our society and through our financial issues and through the relationships we have. So yeah, I agree with health being just beyond the physical and mental.
So we mentioned physical, we mentioned mental. You've alluded to social and financial. Other kinds of health that occur to me maybe include in your career and like the balance between your personal life and your professional life.
Right.
Can you think of sort of other ways in which health has a role?
Well, I'm a person who likes to live on entendres or philosophies. Okay, for example, the name of my show, Frank About Health. It is my name, but I'm being open, transparent, frank, and sincere about issues that most people either do think about or just really don't question, or probably they're unaware of and they're just getting a nugget of thought, right? At the same time, another phrase is that without your health, you can't generate wealth. Or without health, you really have nothing to live for. Or you can't give to others what you can't give to yourself. So the way I think about health is it's the building blocks of a foundation of being human. All right. When you have a sense of health within yourself, peace of mind, you're able to feel the pleasure of giving back to those that are vulnerable and in need. For me, I don't know, maybe it's the fact, yes, I'm not only an epileptic, but I've been in multiple amounts of therapy over my lifetime, but I don't have any feeling of inadequacy in admitting that. I think they call it renting a friend. The point is that we all need to reflect off of ourselves when we don't have the right support system, or probably there's conflict in families, or the friends that you've experienced in your life, they turn out not to really be your friends. We all go through that in various stages of our lives. But I always have found that I am a very sensitive person. Maybe it's my epilepsy. I don't know. I'd have to question that with my neurologist. But it actually served me well in understanding my intentions. So what I mean by being frank about health, or what I think about health, is it is our key to understanding our place in society, our place within our family, our place in life, and for the religious out there, our place with God. Again, I just try to live a balanced life as best as I can. When you have lived your life with epilepsy for 35 plus years, as I have, and you reach a point of stability, which I've had over the last 15 years, there's so much gratitude that is just a part of me that at this point, being an advocate for health, I know it's a mission of mine that was given to me, that I am obligated to do. And I don't have any kind of struggle or frustration in doing it.
So we're gonna boil down to like all these different aspects of health, but how they they're being essential to innovation and creation. Right. But first, we're going to go to a break. So you've been listening to Intangify on talkradio.nyc, and we'll be back shortly.
Are you a business owner? Do you want to be a business owner? Do you work with business owners? Hi, I'm Stephen Fry, your small and medium-sized business, or SMB guy, and I'm the host of the new show, Always Friday. While I love to have fun on my show, we take those Friday feelings of freedom and clarity to discuss popular topics on the minds of SMBs today. Please join me and my various special guests on Friday at 11 a.m. on talkradio.nyc.
Are you a conscious co-creator? Are you on a quest to raise your vibration and your consciousness? I'm Sam Leibowitz, your conscious consultant, and on my show, The Conscious Consultant Hour Awakening Humanity, we will touch upon all these topics and more. Listen live at our new time on Thursdays at 12 noon Eastern Time. That's The Conscious Consultant Hour Awakening Humanity, Thursdays 12 noon on talkradio.nyc.
What really drives success in business? Introducing Intangify, the show that explores the intangible assets that create value and growth. I'm Matthew Asbell, your host and an attorney focused on innovation. Join me Fridays at noon Eastern to discover how innovation, culture, and other intangibles shape thriving companies from startups to established businesses. We'll share strategies to unleash your business's true potential. Tune in live on talkradio.nyc Fridays at noon Eastern and Intangify your business today.
You're listening to Talk Radio NYC. Uplift, educate, empower.
Welcome back to Intangify on talkradio.nyc. I'm your host, Matthew Asbell. My guest is Frank R. Harrison, the host of Frank About Health, also on talkradio.nyc. And we're really looking at the intersection between intangible assets or intangibles and health. Before the break, Frank gave us a little bit of his background and appreciate that. One of the things that Frank told you about was told me about was his psychological degree and psychological background.
Yes.
And Frank, I kept saying how, health is a prerequisite to innovation, but, is there some sort of, that scientific background behind that, or some sort of study, something you learned in psychology that relates to that?
Well, I would have to say that when I was studying psychology at NYU, it was also in the field of neuropsychology. Being an epileptic patient, I was interested in understanding the psychology behind seizure disorder, among how the neurons work and when they misfire and how it affects your moods and things, stuff like that. Also, being an alumnus from NYU, where I got my undergraduate degree from the Stern School of Business, I had the opportunity as an alumnus, while being a student there, to participate in a business plan competition. And being that I was involved in healthcare research at the time, I came up with what I called a marketing program.
I think you're going somewhere where I didn't want to take you yet.
Okay. All right.
Where I wanted to take you is, how is it that health is a prerequisite to any kind of innovation? When you study social psychology, when you study psychology, there's some principles behind that, that, hey, before you can be worrying about this, or this, you got to worry about your health.
Okay, no, I would have to say again, just from my own experience, the thing is that people feel they're most creative and innovative when they feel at peace. When they know if they are suffering from a chronic illness, they're taking their medication, they're doing their exercise, they're getting their sleep, they're getting all of the positive test results back from their doctors, their laboratories, whatever. There's a confidence boost that people get. Oh, I passed my labs this month. Let me go out and bake a cake. Let me throw a party, whatever. I think that there's a direct correlation between when one feels good about their body, their mind in itself joins in. And therefore it becomes inspirational and creative and ideas formulate. But when a person is depressed and when a person is not feeling well, they remain stagnant. I think it's just the way the body-mind connection is.
Yeah, and in the field of social psychology, there's a famous psychologist named Abraham Maslow who came up with something called the hierarchy of need.
Yes.
That I think really directly goes to this concept.
Yeah. From what I understand in my research with Maslow is that it was all about our understanding of our relationship with motivation first meeting our primal needs before we can go into whatever our secondary needs are going to be for our friends or family, or even the ultimate goal, which I don't know if many people really make, which is to be complete altruistic individual to society. I know we've had legendary people like Buddha or even the Dalai Lama or people like that, but I think most people could just do their best within the social system they're raised in, where they get educated from, their workplace, stuff like that. And I think what I always have viewed is, people who go to work for others versus the entrepreneurs, I would say is always a balanced trade-off, because while the entrepreneurs continue to struggle and thrive in doing their own thing, they're lacking some of the social benefits and resources that working for others provides, but yet they're being true to their own self. Maybe that mission and that fuel that fosters a lot of successful entrepreneurs in business are those that just want to maintain their sense of peace within themselves, that they live their intention or their dream or their mission or whatever. So I just have to say that for one to have a sense of the hierarchy of needs also has to be balanced out with how comfortable they feel at the level they're at. Some people might just be comfortable in just meeting their primal needs. Although one can say, like I've had episodes on Frank about health, about narcissism. We can wonder how extreme are they being with Maslow. But when it comes down to when you get to the second or third level, which most people are at, and they're taking care of their family, their friends, their community, there's always a sense of peace when you're achieving your goals. You may not be completely wealthy as you'd like to be, but as long as you're at peace, then you're balancing out your sense of mental health in that case.
I like how, and I studied this when I was an undergraduate too, this hierarchy of needs sort of was suggested that we all aspire towards this greatness, this self-actualization.
Yes.
But we can't do that if we don't have food on the table. And so we start with, like you said, the primal need. We start with, we gotta have food, we need air, we need water, and we need health.
Right.
And then we can move on to, okay, are we safe? Right? Is this an environment where we're going to be robbed, where we're worried that there's risk? Right?
Yes.
That's going to also put fear and slow us down, right? And there's another level up where it's like your relationship,
Yes.
love and friendship and connection,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
So I like how there are sort of these multiple levels, and once you've achieved a first level, you go on to the second one with the idea of the ultimate thing being this, self-actualization, where you can be altruistic, where you can really understand all of who you are without the distraction of the problem you have to solve because you're missing something.
Right. The self-actualization need, I think, is the challenge for all of us. It also depends on what country you're from, because we live in a world with various social systems, and some of them are actually deterrent for people reaching the point of self-actualization. I don't think the United States is one of them, but there have been times and things that I've seen in the last 10 or so years that make me question that. I think as long as you're true to yourself, even if you're not fully actualized in what things that maybe you wanted to accomplish by a certain age, or the people you wanted to be involved with, or if you wanted to have 100 children versus 2 children, I mean, that's an extreme case, obviously. But the thing is that self-actualization sometimes is just enough as long as you understand yourself, even if you haven't reached the point of Dalai Lama or people like that.
Yeah, I related to that, but actually you're saying maybe the US, is not one of those societies. I actually think that it is.
Well, I would say than most, absolutely. I mean, what is it? We the people, it's a free country, and we all strive to be a more perfect union.
Yeah, I'm going the other direction though. I'm suggesting that in a capitalistic, selfish society, we're trained to look out for ourselves, and we think about motivation.
Yes.
I certainly try to be motivated by mutual benefit,
Right.
And even altruistic benefit, but there definitely are people who, a lot of people who are not, and the society is incentivizing them just as much.
Yes.
Motivation comes from, the motivation behind what people do in a society where you need to get things, where you're materialistic.
Yes.
Is you have to kind of divorce yourself from that. in order to get a, advance on the hierarchy.
True, but at the same time, those individuals that seem to be focused on that linear path where, it's my way or no way, they are lacking a certain connection with others that maybe they inherently want to strive and seek, but they're not sure of that, or they were misled along the way in achieving their other needs. And if they still haven't completely satisfied those other primal needs, they continue to distract from what kind of reward they achieve when they've connected with another human being. There are rewards in that. I'm glad to say I'm one of them that has seen that. But for those that haven't, but yet are successful on another path, they are still limited, but they're choosing a path that makes them feel a sense of peace, but they may never find self-actualization.
I'm sort of,
it's like a risk reward, because on one level, when you've got the individuals who've, let's say, focused on the entrepreneurial path and I'm going to become the richest man in the world, or whatever the story may be, they may have gotten to that point, but we've heard many stories of wealthy people who are not really happy.
Sure.
So some people along the way that manage to find the other direction are willing to offset whatever kind of returns they were expecting of financial or materialistic means, because they're seeing the other benefit through reaching human connection with others, whether it's personally or professionally.
Yeah, I agree with that. I'm seeing sort of a rubber meets the road kind of way, a difference between meeting immediate or short-term needs versus long-term. So if I meet you and I want something from you, I have that agenda, and the relationship is structured on what can I get that thing from you? I want you to buy something from me. I want you to pay me for something. Whatever it is I'm trying to get, that short-term thing actually hurts to some degree my idea of building a relationship with you in the long term, where you get benefit because you know me and I get benefit because I know you, and I'm not out for that immediate.
Yeah, because but that would be like a building block towards the path towards narcissism. People are happy being narcissistic if they are narcissistic. I mean, they don't understand that it is pervasive, so they are happy with it, and therefore they don't see that if they've only made a transactional relationship with me and they meet their need and then I'm gone because I'm no longer of use to them, maybe they don't know what they've just given up.
Oh, that's true. Yeah.
And at the same time, an individual like me who's been exposed to those people before in the past can pretty much detect that kind of person up front. I'm 70-30. I'm not 100% aware of those people. There are a lot of good ones out there that know how to disguise themselves until the very last minute. But the thing is I'm so used to knowing that if I'm going to get very little in return from that person, then I just accept what I get, but I manage my expectations.
Yeah.
I don't create this sense of, oh, I really hope this works out so that we can go into business together, or no. I just, all right, this is the transaction you wish for. It's not really completely satisfying to me. I will meet that goal, but I will be looking at my bigger picture, because at the end of the day, the best relationship is with yourself. Not selfish, but when you know what you need, what you want, what your goals are, what you want to strive for, then you're able to connect with others that can help you get there, but you can also help them get there.
Yeah.
That is the ideal that I strive for. I'm not saying that everyone should. It really depends on the individual. But the thing is again, based on Maslow's hierarchy of needs, one feels healthy when they've reached a level that their entire structure, their system, their body is willing to accept.
Yeah, I'm with you, and I agree. I think that and this is going to take us into our next segment, which is really, how can you really innovate, right? You need to kind of get there, but
right.
But now like when we come back, I think we should really get into the aspect of having met those needs, including your health,
right,
and then having those things be the inspiration for your future innovation and success.
Exactly.
So you've been listening to Intangify on talkradio.nyc, and we'll be back shortly.
Are you passionate about the conversation around racism? Hi, I'm Reverend Dr. TLC, host of the Dismantle Racism Show, which airs every Thursday at 11 a.m. Eastern on talkradio.nyc. Join me and my amazing guests as we discuss ways to uncover, dismantle, and eradicate racism. That's Thursdays at 11 o'clock a.m. on talkradio.nyc.
In a post-COVID world, you may have many unanswered questions regarding your health. Are you looking to live a healthier lifestyle? Do you have a desire to learn more about mental health and enhance your quality of life? Or do you just want to participate in self-understanding and awareness? I'm Frank R. Harrison, host of Frank About Health, and each Thursday, I will tackle these questions and work to enlighten you. Tune in every Thursday at 5 p.m. on talkradio.nyc, and I will be frank about health to advocate for all of us.
Hey everybody, it's Tommy D, the nonprofit sector connector, coming at you from my attic. Each week here on talkradio.nyc, I host the program Philanthropy in Focus. Nonprofits impact us each and every day, and it's my focus to help them amplify their message and tell their story. Listen each week at 10 a.m. Eastern Standard Time until 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, right here on talkradio.nyc.
You're listening to Talk Radio NYC at www.talkradio.nyc. Now broadcasting 24 hours a day.
Welcome back to Intangify on talkradio.nyc. My guest is Frank R. Harrison, the host of Frank About Health, also on talkradio.nyc. Before the break, we were talking about health really as a prerequisite to innovation. You need to have your health. And we talked about different kinds of health. Right. And we sort of talked about the hierarchy of need and sort of where you can get to or where you can aspire to get to and what motivates people. Right. I think where I want to take you now is where you wanted to go a little earlier, which is health is not only a prerequisite, but it also can be an inspiration.
Correct.
And I'd love to know how health has been an inspiration in your life.
Oh, it's very simple. And in my case, I developed epilepsy when I was 16 years old in my high school history class, while I had stayed up all night studying for an important calculus exam. I was in a very competitive concentration at Brooklyn Technical High School. It was called the Math Science Institute. And I was under such stress because of the individuals in the class that were unhappy with a 99. They wanted 100. And I think I internalized that stress so much that it probably was a trigger for my very first seizure. That all being said, I think I've been motivated by just trying to stay seizure-free. And that allowed me to learn creative skills in terms of managing my health, managing my work pressure with school and eventually working and going to college, of course. And then I just, by default, continued by the way I strove to be the best that I could be. I became very entrepreneurial in nature. I've always been told by teachers and friends and family members, you're so creative, you're so articulate, I'm like not understand what the hell they're talking about. I mean, but all I was doing was, in my mind, trying to survive at an era when epilepsy was so stigmatizing that whenever anyone saw me go into a seizure, they would say, you just had a seizure. I said, oh no, I was just exhausted. I didn't have enough sleep last night, trying to make excuses for it. So I ended up being alone a lot and isolated. Ironically though, when you are isolated and alone, if you're being productive, you can do your best creative thinking. Most people like to be around others all the time, especially in the high school years. It's puberty time and whatever. You're not interested in being different. You're interested in being in the know or with the right crew or whatever the phrase is. But for me, it served me well when I got to college and when I went beyond that. Everything I ended up pursuing through innovation, through entrepreneurship, through developing a show, that was all through my need to continue to fight and advocate for myself and for others. So I would have to say that the restrictions and limitations of epilepsy became my benefit, became my biggest asset. Now I freely, even people I don't know, if they say, what makes you so creative? It's probably because I'm an epileptic. You know, I use it as my asset of my character that fuels my motivation and innovation. And a lot of it has been in the media and entertainment industries, you know, especially with talkradio.nyc. I'm in my second year now, you know, but at the same time, there was a business model that I did create while I was at NYU, obtaining my psychology degree, that was really to benefit the community of people not having their healthcare expenses met. Their insurance was not adequate enough. This was pre-Obamacare. So I think that in itself was really the precursor to getting involved in podcasting and new technologies that are around today and expedited because of COVID. But at that time, it was a simple case where I had found myself in another predicament where I had a choice to pay my health insurance, epileptic patients on individual carriers being priced out at $3,000 a month premium. It was either that or pay my phone bill. I chose to pay my phone bill. I dropped my health coverage. And I said to myself, how is it that I can't pay my phone bill and get cash back for my health care? And I created a business plan. I was in a competition at NYU. I called the company MedCash, Community Action for Social Healthcare. That's what the cash stood for. And the focus really was to provide cash back just for living your life. Use your debit card, or at that time, the iPhone came out. So use your mobile wallet, your Apple iPhone in particular, and get cash back at brands that cared for their consumers' healthcare. So I was targeting Verizon, Starbucks, Target, Macy's, typical brands that I knew back then that were trying to do their own incentive programs. I thought, create a cashback program, join MedCash as a member, and therefore the cash you get back is used exclusively for your co-payments, high deductibles, and things that healthcare was not covering. Your insurance was not covering. I had to table that though, because my epilepsy took over. And as such, because of seizure activity and whatever, I kept the trademark alive for about 3 or 4 years later, and I let it go. And I renamed my company Health eMedia, which has now created, well, Frank About Health is one of my properties. You know, another one, I'm now in partnership with Hilton Hotels, my former employer, because during the pandemic, some of their brands in the New York area were turning their hotels into essential worker places. And when I met up with them back then, 2020, we were talking about developing a podcast together called the Cadre Report, which never materialized because all the restrictions in New York were lifted by the time it was ready. So I came back to Frank About Health with the intention to still bring in Hilton as a sponsor in the future while revamping MedCash, but as a community. Because going back to your earlier question about what makes a person innovative when they're healthy, I think hidden inside, all of us want to be connected. We want to be part of a community, a tribe, they call it, especially on social media. MedCash can now be that tribe on the right platform. But until that right platform is developed, I'm just going to keep it where it is right now, which is waiting for the next person to carry the torch.
It's a great story. I had some experience early in my career working for a psychiatrist who specialized in attention deficit disorder. And I was convinced, I've never been diagnosed, but I was convinced that myself and others in my family should have been diagnosed. But also that it was an advantage for me that that I was able to take seemingly unrelated concepts and form creative things by combining them and thinking of them in new ways that nobody thought of.
Right.
And so I never saw it as, if I had it, it never stopped me from doing anything. So I can't relate entirely to the epilepsy situation, right. But in a sense, it fueled the fire of innovation for me.
Yes.
And I think that's fascinating and useful and powerful.
Yes.
And I'm also reminded of all these like human interest stories you see of like, let's say, athletes, the athlete who, who lost the limb and then, competes in the actual like, Olympics and the achievements that people have just in spite of, and not only in spite of and inspired by their disability or problem or whatever it is.
Right. I do believe, like in the case when they say someone loses a limb or they lose their hearing or they lose their sight, they develop either an enhanced, well, one of their other four senses becomes enhanced, or they develop a sixth sense about something that most people who have all their senses be the farthest from their imagination. Now, in the case of what you were saying about having this gift to integrate things that are seemingly mismatched and come up with a new innovative solution, that is the perfect example of someone who is healthy and their brain waves, their neurological pathways are so hyper enhanced, maybe based on education, diversity of experience, life experience, traumas, that has just enabled you to come up with things that probably most people can't think of. Now, I always give a statement like that based on the fact that as an epileptic who's had numerous seizures between the ages of 16, and I think my last one was when I was in my mid-40s. The point of the matter is that I do know other pathways were enhanced in my brain. All of a sudden, I'm remembering details of events that happened to me when I was 5. That is to say, okay, I have a good memory, but no, I do believe sometimes when you're undergoing a seizure, certain neural pathways come and create new skill sets that you're unaware of until the time comes. At the same time, having to deal with constant stress over, am I going to have another seizure? Am I on the right medication? What happened with me, the choice between the phone bill and the insurance? Or watching my father go through cancer, watching my cousin recently go through a whole upheaval of neurological balance and health and wellness. It's just, okay, well, I've already been through my own traumas. I see what you're going through and I know what you need to accomplish. So I just learned through my traumas what other people need, which I probably would have never understood if I never had my first seizure. So I think just from that experience alone, I learned to look at innovation as a necessary outgrowth of a disability. And if you own that, that's truly being entrepreneurial. But if you own that, you use it as an advantage instead of, I shouldn't be thinking this way. What are people going to say? They're going to say, wow, I wish I knew you 5 years ago. That's also another thing. We live in a society that unfortunately, whether it's through social media or through improper media or people who are just not qualified to say half the things they do, either they believe it or they don't, or they're jaded or they're skeptical or they're not fully thinking anything, they're living in fear. If people would just give themselves the moment to reflect and just see, okay, I have this weakness, how can I make it into a strength? Then they can look at it in a different way and actually inspire others. Just a matter of perception. I once said to a friend of mine that I should write a book one day called Perception is Everything. Because it truly is. It is the perception that creates consensus. And when consensus is achieved, that becomes the majority opinion, whether it's right or wrong. That's also dangerous. But the thing is, as long as you have your own inner guide to do reality testing and see whether or not what you're hearing or what you're seeing is workable, is doable to meet some of those hierarchies of needs, including the actualization phase.
It's interesting. So I mentor a lot of students and recent lawyers, recently newly minted lawyers. Where's I going with that? Sorry, I just lost my train of thought. You were saying something.
You mentor them in terms of being able to harness their creativity?
I mentor them in their careers. I noticed where I was going.
Okay.
And when they're in the job market, they're taught about the interview questions that they get from prospective employers. The interview questions along the lines of, tell me a weakness of yours and how you overcome it. Tell me about your strengths, things like that.
Right.
And I've heard when they're told to respond to how they're trained to respond to the sort of standard interview question of what's your weakness is to take a strength and disguise it as a weakness, or to say your weakness but show how it's a strength. because it's exactly what you just said. It's basically like you just reinterpret it and you look at how it is valuable. And when you paint it in that light, you're helping other people to see it in that light. And then they all kind of go along with it. Sure, that's the way it is.
But you know what the hidden message in all of that is? While you're in the typical interview setup, I guess for a lot of people graduating from, I guess, law school or business school, and they're going to see how to impress the interviewer, what they're telling you to do is make the other person see your value. But the best way to show them your value is when you believe in it yourself. And so it's easy to turn your weakness into a strength when you believe in that weakness as a strength.
You got to believe it, though. That's the thing.
Exactly.
We got to go to a break. But you've been listening to Intangify on talkradio.nyc, and we'll be right back.
Hey everybody, it's Tommy D, the nonprofit sector connector, coming at you from my attic. Each week here on talkradio.nyc, I host a program, Philanthropy in Focus. Nonprofits impact us each and every day, and it's my focus to help them amplify their message and tell their story. Listen each week at 10 a.m. Eastern Standard Time until 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, right here on talkradio.nyc.
Are you on edge? Hey, we live in challenging, edgy times, so let's lean in. I'm Sandra Bargeman, the host of The Edge of Every Day, which airs each Monday at 7 p.m. Eastern Time on talkradio.nyc. Tune in live with me and my friends and colleagues as we share stories and perspectives about pushing boundaries and exploring our rough edges. That's The Edge of Every Day on Mondays at 7 p.m. Eastern Time on talkradio.nyc.
Are you a conscious co-creator? Are you on a quest to raise your vibration and your consciousness? I'm Sam Leibowitz, your conscious consultant, and on my show, The Conscious Consultant Hour, Awakening Humanity, we will touch upon all these topics and more. Listen live at our new time on Thursdays at 12 noon Eastern Time. That's The Conscious Consultant Hour, Awakening Humanity, Thursdays 12 noon on talkradio.nyc.
You're listening to Talk Radio NYC at www.talkradio.nyc. Now broadcasting 24 hours a day.
Welcome back to Intangify. I'm your host, Matthew Asbell, and our guest is Frank R. Harrison, the host of Frank About Health, also on talkradio.nyc. We've been talking about the intersection between health and intangible assets, and we covered some aspects about health as a prerequisite to innovation. We've talked a little bit about the hierarchy of needs. We've had a pretty interesting conversation about motivation. And then we started to talk really about health as inspiration for creativity of all different kinds. So Frank, I think where I want to go with this now is to talk to you about you as an innovator and the kinds of needs that you have as an innovator, because I think maybe that would relate more to the entrepreneurs in our audience.
Okay, I could say that based on our conversation, a lot of what I've innovated over my lifetime, including Frank About Health, has been to solve a problem of mine, but in turn discussing it openly with others that have the similar problem. And I think over the last 2 years, and thanks to Sam, I have been able to solve the problems of helping people deal with crises in the area of epilepsy, as well as mental health. But even more so during the COVID pandemic. I mean, that was an upheaval for all of us, I'm sure. But can you imagine doing a podcast while you're dealing with people that have been infected with COVID in your own home and not sure if you should even go home? Or even the opportunity that I've had with Hilton to be able to feature them as the brand that is there for people during a pandemic. And which is why that even though that it's no longer an urgent need for them, they still want to work with me in a different way, and that way is still under development. So I think that my needs are to continue to innovate where I feel needed, but with the knowledge that I have the resources that are needed to accomplish what other people need from me. Like if someone needed me to help them open a restaurant, I'm sorry, I'm not your guy. I could recommend a good chef, but that's as far as I know. But in terms of I am so amazed with your knowledge of intellectual property on many levels, especially in healthcare. And I know I had battled the whole issue, like even we discussed on my show yesterday, the generic versus brand drug issue. I had to go to Canada for my medications because my insurance was not covering brand or generic, but Canada was giving me the price of insurance, 3 months supply of branded drugs. It was a lifesaver. Now, that was a learning experience in the following way. I want to know that as I continue to develop Frank About Health or work closely with Hilton, or even develop healthy media, which is going to be a whole basis of intellectual property assets to help communicate various media channels of communication, knowledge, resources for others. Should I be involved heavily with an attorney and get the proper contractual guidance? Should I trademark everything? Should I copyright everything? What do I do if given the opportunity to create a healthcare documentary? Should I be working with members of the entertainment industry again? Or in other words, is this something that I can coordinate with the community of people that I've already managed to build with talkradio.nyc?
There's so much to it, and I'm mindful of, in this capacity, not wanting to be conveying any legal advice in any capacity. Sure. But I think there's some general guidance that the entrepreneurs listening to this program, like yourself, would appreciate, because it's not uncommon for entrepreneurs, as they learn about the different kinds of intellectual property and what they're and they think about what they're doing and what they could ultimately get in terms of rights and protections and assets,
right?
To want to do it all, and as the lawyer, on one hand, you see a client that wants to do all these things, and that's income for you. That's how you can generate more. You can do more things.
Right.
But going back to what we were talking about before with short-term and long-term needs, if we look at our client, if we look at you and we say, oh, well, I can just go do all these things that he wants me to do, he thinks that he needs, I get what I want out of you in the short term, I get that benefit, but ultimately the relationship is not going to be very good,
right?
Especially when you figured out that you've spent all your bank account on me and not on the marketing that you should have been doing or other aspects. So, I think the advice is that you need to find somebody with whom you connect and who you trust. Going back to our program yesterday, right? It's all about trust,
right?
But you have to trust somebody, and you got to feel that person is looking after your needs in the long term. So they've got to be thinking about, okay, I could go and register every trademark and every copyright and every patent and every possible thing worldwide, world domination of intellectual property rights. And Frank will just be paying me out of his pocket and will not be able to afford to do anything, and his business will fail. Or I can think about, all right, what do you really need right now, and what can be put off, and where are your goals for expansion?
Right.
How do we come up with a strategy together? Yes, I will earn income over time from being your attorney if I were your attorney in that capacity, but you will appreciate that you prioritized properly and that you spent the money on the things you really needed. And you'll get the message of, hey, you want to come back when this happens because we're going to need to do more then.
Correct.
Sort of iterate instead of being like, conquer the world today.
Exactly. So then I guess maybe where I've also, because, like I mentioned, there was MedCash, and then there was building Frank About Health, but then there was putting that to sleep because that had to be done. it says to me that I really need I'll talk about the cadre report. I need a cadre of attorneys that handles each bucket and they interact with each other so that the whole big picture is looked at. It's not one person that's the solution. It's the team, like you mentioned yesterday, that you're building even legally in order, especially if it's an area like healthcare. It's a team of attorneys that can see which piece of intellectual priority takes precedence over the long-term mission of my IP company, Healthy Media, right?
Yes and no, because when you're starting up, I mean, it depends on where you are in your business, but when you're starting up as an entrepreneur, you really don't have the luxury of having a whole team of attorneys. You're going to break your bank that way too.
Exactly.
So you got to start somewhere. And, you try to identify the area of need. Hopefully the person you're working with, if you only do have one, and there are people who have two, and there are people who have 10,
Yes.
but there are people who bring them in-house, right?
Yes.
But I think as a starting point, you have somebody you trust, and you also trust that person to know when something is beyond their capacity or their knowledge, and to know people who they can send you to who can help you with those things.
Right.
And then they bring in the team and they help you form the team, rather than you have this team. This cadre of attorneys from like magically you started. I've got these 8 attorneys.
Well, obviously, if they're part of the same firm, that definitely cuts down on wherever the confusion can start to ignite.
It can, but it doesn't have to be. And I have many situations in my practice where I collaborate with attorneys in other firms who, have established relationships with the mutual client, and it's more about like, we need to stay in our lane, right? I don't want to step on their toes. We don't make each other look bad. We try to help each other. And ultimately we got to think about the client, and how do we not end up costing the client more because they're paying for the 2 of us.
Right.
Or the 3 of us, or whatever it's going to be.
Interesting. Well, I guess that kind of goes in line then when you're looking at the financial ramifications of whatever you're building, while at the same time trying to offset expenses. You have to be mindful of your accountant along with your attorney. Do you find that from the entrepreneurial clients that you've managed, that the law firm is able to provide the accountant as well as part of the team? Or do they have to find that accountant on their own?
I mean, we don't have accountants in our firm that we assign to our clients. That's not usually how it works. But certainly we work a lot with a lot of different accountants, and sometimes the accountants are our contact within the client. Sometimes, sometimes they're accountants that our clients have told us about, or that we just know them from networking.
Right.
And so, we can refer clients to accountants, and then they go and do that. We don't get any benefit from that. But the client does.
Cost of doing business with your client in terms of meeting their needs, ancillarily speaking.
Well, I mean, like, part of this, regardless of what you do, whether you're a lawyer, you're an accountant, you're an entrepreneur, like a lot of what all of us do is connect people with each other that we think might be helpful. I mean, that's what Sam has done for us.
Correct.
And going back to the theme, we have intangible health. We can take seemingly unrelated things and put them together and go, let's see what this is like. Let's see what we think.
Exactly. And of course, if you have a healthy client and a healthy attorney, you have a healthy relationship.
I hope so.
Exactly.
So, maybe you have a final message that you could share with our audience. Mostly our audience are entrepreneurial.
Sure.
What would be the message you'd want to share with them?
Well, in the realm of intellectual property, especially in the area of healthcare, you have to remember that you yourself are a piece of intellectual property. Like I was telling Matt here that Frank R. Harrison is my name because my father shares the same name with me. So I differentiate myself with my middle initial, especially when meeting people in healthcare circles and other business circles that my father normally does not have those relationships with. However, that being said, my recommendation to all you entrepreneurs out there, besides knowing your intellectual property within your business or within your other podcasts, or if you're a screenwriter, your script, so forth and so on, know you are a piece of that IP because it came from your mind to that paper, to that formula, to that pharmaceutical drug. Therefore, always keep in mind that you are just as valuable as your business is. That would be my takeaway.
I think that's a great message. I would add that you're just as valuable because years later that business may be gone, that drug may be done, but you're as good as your next thing, So, the one thing you created doesn't matter. You're going to keep iterating.
And then you make yourself valuable enough to leave a legacy behind so that when you've moved on in whatever way that means, someone can carry it forward because it's still for the community at the end of the day.
Yeah, and there's also another kind of help, right? The sort of succession planning and thinking about things of that nature.
Exactly.
So that wraps us up for this episode of Intangify. I'm really glad, Frank, that we had the chance to do these two shows together.
Yes.
And explore the interaction between intangibles and health. But you've been listening to Intangify on talkradio.nyc. Tune in on Fridays at noon Eastern for our future episodes. And you can catch the archive at talkradio.nyc as well as YouTube, Facebook, LinkedIn, twitch.tv.
Yes.
I can't keep track of them all, but I'm sure you're going to find it. But anyway, glad to have you and I'll see you next time. Thanks so much.
Yep. See you next week on Frank About Health as well.
5 p.m. on Thursdays.
Yeah. Thanks.